Nice to see everyone. Let me know if you can hear me okay. Thumbs up. Sounds okay? Great. We'll wait maybe another minute or so before we get started. And most of you know that I usually spotlight myself, but you can always choose gallery view if you prefer that. And I am streaming tonight to our YouTube channel, but it will only capture audio. It doesn't capture any video except for mine, just so people know that too. Always good to begin an evening of practice by just simply checking our attitude. And of course, this means not judging the attitude that we notice, but just acknowledging that the heart or the mind is like this. And we might feel a little down, or we might feel a little manic, or whatever it might be, sleepy, full of worry, anxious, numb, happy. A lot of the work I did when I worked in the schools back in the 80s and early 90s. And sometimes I was what's called like a behavior specialist for a school. So all the children that were not doing so well, I'd go see them. And it's just such an important skill to be able to recognize that there is a particular mood or attitude and to have some sense of what that is. And a lot of us humans who are having trouble, at any given time, part of the trouble is we don't really know what we're feeling. We haven't, we don't have the skill to connect in that clear way, that way that has a lot of integrity, self-honesty. We don't know how to connect with what's going on. So there's this disorientation and that arises from the lack of integrity. Like the heart is operating, but it's not really connected to what's going on. It's not really feeling in an honest way what's going on. So if no other time, at least at the beginning of a sitting time, where we've put aside all of our other duties and responsibilities for the most part, we can actually be interested. Well, honey, how are you doing? Yeah, it's been a while since I've checked in. And to really mean it, like I really do want to know how I'm doing. What's moving here? What filter is active in our mind, in my mind right now? Can I care about how it is? No matter how it is, can I care about it? Be relating to my own experience with care. And the care is just that, I guess it's sort of a primal instinct to want to take care of ourselves, right? So when I check in, when each of us right now are checking in, it's really arising from compassion, self-compassion. I really want to know how am I doing? Tight or relaxed? Content or discontent? Can I meet my experience as it is? Like to be with my experience without being in conflict with it. Doesn't mean that I would choose for my experience to be the way it is right now, but wisdom understands it is the way it is right now. So to be in opposition to reality, it just doesn't make sense. It is this way now. And that's really how we begin to transform our experience. If it can be transformed, sometimes it can be, sometimes it won't be, depending on the momentum or the forces that are behind the particular mood or attitude. But in any case, it's always helpful to be interested in how it is. And it's always helpful to be relating to that mood or attitude or quality of the mind that we discover in a kind way, in an interested way, in an understanding way. Oh, yeah, it is this way. It's probably lawful, like it's not just happening, this mood. It probably arose due to whatever supporting causes there were. Whether I can name those supporting causes or not doesn't really matter, but I can know that it was conditional, it was lawful, that my mood is like this now. And that's really in the direction of acceptance, coming into alignment with the way it is. And there's a deep spiritual healing, I guess I'd call it, when we come into alignment with the way it is. I've been talking about Samadhi these last few weeks, and this can be translated as the stability of present moment awareness, concentration, the unification of the heart, a gathered, settled heart. And another way to think about Samadhi is, our mind, our heart, that everything is working together harmoniously, like all the different qualities of the mind, of the heart, are working together in unison toward a common goal to be intimate with the way it is, to be present. That's a nice definition, maybe a little bit more technical definition of samadhi. The mind isn't opposing itself, which creates a lot of, reverberations and tension. So as we settle into our sitting time now, checking your posture, making adjustments, and valuing as best you can, valuing stillness in your sitting posture. And this integrity of uprightness so that the body is reflecting the mind's interest in being alert and present, and also the mind's interest in being relaxed and receptive. So let the posture that we found be good enough. We begin with sustained present moment awareness. And everyone, take your time to remind yourself what it means for you to be present. Like, what's the difference between being present and being distracted? Clarify that in your own experience now. And then get interested in sustaining this present moment awareness. Without getting tight about it. I'm really curious about how the mind falls back into distractedness and how it can begin again. And so much in this first step is discovering and keeping in mind this valuing of present moment awareness, knowing what it is and valuing it. It's a lot about remembering. We are remembering to recognize that this experience is being known. Or we're remembering to recognize what the mind is knowing, what the mind is doing. without judgment. So it has both this more assertive quality where the mind is connecting. It's understanding, oh yeah, this is being known. It's like this. It has more of an assertive energy in the mind. And then there's this receptive, which really has to do with the sustaining of present moment awareness, letting, in a sense, the moment reveal itself, letting all things unfold. But really, it's up to each of us to learn how to sustain present moment awareness and to recognize when we lose the thread of present moment awareness. And then to initiate that particular effort to once again remember, oh, this is being known. This is what's being known here and now. And finally, for this first instruction, take it as a kind of fun challenge, this sustaining of present moment awareness. Even to the point, not that you have to, but even to the point of counting, just in a relaxed way. And each time you count the next number, just recognize, oh yeah, the present moment, I'm remembering to recognize the present moment, that this is being known here and now. And remember, we're not focusing on, if you do the counting, we're not focusing so much on the counting, but the counting is a reminder that this is being known. The whole experience, or whatever's predominant moment by moment. And for this first stage or instruction, we're purposefully not focusing on a single object, a meditation anchor, but just interested in sustained present moment awareness. So let's have about 10 minutes of silence now. And when you're ready, begin to experiment with sustained, silent, present moment awareness. So drop any counting or drop the use of phrases. And we're training the mind to be interested in what's subtle, which is that silent sense of space, the sense of silent space between thoughts. But we're learning how to keep it in mind, no matter the activity that's coming and going, including thought. So don't try to stop thoughts. Try to be interested in the silent space of the present moment. Try to recognize it and keep it in mind. And just begin again and again when the mind gets identified with thoughts. We're cultivating a value, an interest in silence, stillness, that open, that sense of open space here and now. We practice not giving up, It's challenging because we're asking the mind to be aware of what's subtle. So the mind's not used to keeping that silent sense of space in mind. So we have to be willing to begin again and again, cultivating this interest. And what really helps is noticing the subtle pleasure, this gathering, the settling, this continuity of interest. There's something deeply healing, even satisfying about it. So we want to notice that because it will build the confidence that the effort is worthwhile. We call this pleasure the pleasure of seclusion or calm or the pleasure of tranquility. And it's really appropriate to appreciate it. And in the appreciating of it, to let it spread, widen. So there's nothing not being touched by this good feeling in the mind and body. Permeates, infuses, touches everything. Like the texture of velvet, smooth, pleasant, settled. And then let's take some time and adjust the body as you need to, so you feel comfortable. Another big welcome to everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. My name's Mark Nunberg. If anybody's here for the first time, one of the guiding teachers at Common Ground Meditation Center in Minneapolis. Common Ground's been around since 1993, so now over 30 years. It's been some time. And these last few weeks, I've been looking at teachings and practices of Samadhi, concentration, the continuity of present moment awareness, stability of present moment awareness, different ways we talk about this Pali word Samadhi. It's an important word. But mostly what I've been just sort of bringing our attention to is cultivating a value of calm and tranquility and serenity, and really seeing, it's obviously, I think it's obvious, it's really counter the general vibe in our culture, which, we tend to value agitation and kind of bubbly, bright, but unsettled energy. I mean, especially if you look at the kind of movies we choose and the kind of music we listen to. I mean, generally speaking, the kind of news we read, the kind of activities we engage in, the kind of food we eat even, like the spicy food. There's something about our attraction to what's, to be blunt, irritating. Have you ever found yourself watching some movie or TV show, and then wisdom just sort of comes online, and wisdom just wonders, what are you doing? This isn't pleasant. Your body, mind is really tight right now. What are you doing? What is this about? And if we're honest with ourselves, we would say, somehow I feel quite compelled, quite attracted to connecting with something that actually is agitating and irritating. Can't say why, habit, whatever, but that's how it is. So what I'm suggesting is, let's take a new look, a fresh look, a deeper look at our own subjective experience of calm and tranquility. And remember, real calm, at least the calm I'm talking about, tranquility, it isn't like we generally will associate tranquility with being dull and sleepy. And there is a kind of calm that is related to sleepiness and dullness. But that's not the spiritual calm that we're interested in becoming friends with and keeping in mind, and sort of living in a way that develops and maintains the quality of calm. Because the calm I'm talking about has a lot of energy. It's just that the energy is in a potential state. It doesn't need to do anything. And hopefully, maybe in the guided sit tonight, there were at least moments. I mean, it's very common for even someone who's a good meditator, good practitioner, who's been doing it a long time. It's very common for tranquility to tip into sleepiness and dullness. So you don't need to be embarrassed or think of yourself as a failure if that happens. It's very common, even for really experienced meditators. But we want to get familiar when there's a lot of calm and the mind is also bright, alert. There's really it's like an inner light bulb. I mean, there's really a sense of energy, but the energy is settled. It isn't compelled neurotically to think something, to do something, to stop something. And actually, it's a particular, in developing the talent, the skill to have samadhi, this beautiful, gathered, unified quality of our mind, of our heart, we actually have to get used to having a lot of energy without compulsively thinking I have to do something with it. Give me a problem to figure out. Give me a fantasy to think through or imagine, you know. Give me something to do. I used to tell this story a lot when I was way back when I first started teaching. And in the intro class, I don't know where I first heard it, but anyway, the story of a practitioner or just somebody who's really greedy and wants a bunch of stuff, and he comes across a genie, that will give him whatever he wants or she wants. And so the genie, comes out of the bottle and says, hey, what do you want? But let me just say before I respond to your wishes, if you don't keep me busy, I'm going to eat you up. And the person says, well, no problem. I got a lot of things I want. And so he starts listing them. But the genie was pretty quick. He'd say, I want a cabin on Lake Superior. And boom, cabin was there, perfect, just as the person wanted, and on like that. And it wasn't too long before the person started running out of things he wanted and started panicking. And he went to see somebody wise who finally let him, gave him a hint, said, you got to tell that genie to take the biggest tree in the forest, cut it down, strip off the branches, put that tree or that big pole really now, put it upright in the middle of a big empty field. Just stick it in the ground. Genies can do whatever. So he did. And then once that's done, to climb the pole and then to climb down and to climb up and to keep climbing up and down the pole. So right before the genie was about to eat up this guy, he tells him to do that. He tells the genie to go get a big tree, take off the branches, make a big pole out of it, stick it in a big open field, and start climbing up and down. So the genie, like he did everything else, he just did it, in no time, running up and down the pole. Weeks go by, months go by, years go by, maybe a couple decades go by, and eventually the genie's, goes to the guy and says, hey, how about I just lean against the pole? And if you have anything you ever need, you just come see me. But otherwise, no reason to be running up and down this pole. Maybe I'll just be here, content, peaceful, relaxed, leaning against the pole. And so this is just and obviously a story to help us understand some of the skillful means that we might need to use. Because the mind, most of our minds, it's usually put to work. It's kind of a beast of burden. I mean, not that all the work we ask our mind to do is useful work, right? Like, how am I going to get even with that person? Or, silly things like trying to figure out Wordle. Those of you who know the puzzle or have puzzles that you try to do, right? It's endless, just what we ask the mind to do. So in tranquility practice and that emphasis in our meditation practice to settle the mind, heart, and body, we're really, we might need to give the mind something to do so it doesn't do all the other things that it would do, right? And that's, you might already figure it out. That's why we have things like an anchor. I mean, even some of you maybe picked up my suggestion to simply count how long you can sustain present moment awareness. I forgot to say that. And then you begin again when you realize that you've gotten distracted, lost in thought. And once you realize that, you start back with one, and you just see how far you can go. Can you get to 6? Can you get to 86? Just keep counting. Sometimes people will just coordinate it with each exhalation, adds a little bit more of concrete something to keep connecting with. But it isn't really about the counting or about being aware of the exhalations. As I mentioned in the guided sit, we want to just see if we can sustain present moment awareness and how long. And it really gives the mind something to do, because that initially our the mind is restless. It's demanding. It will find something interesting, right? Like when we wake up in the morning, we go, whoa, those dreams are out there. It's just like the mind just makes stuff up. It's really good. A lot of our waking life is the same way. We just don't think of it that way. In dreams, we kind of expect the mind to be out there and, putting things together in unique ways that we wouldn't consider rational here in this waking life. But really, we're just kind of, that's what the mind does, endlessly, restlessly. Constructing is a really good word to help us understand that particular aspect of the mind, imagining mind. This is from the Dhammapada, this collection of suttas from the early Buddhist tradition. It goes like this: just as an arrowsmith shapes an arrow to perfection, so does the wise person shape the mind, which is fickle, unsteady, vulnerable, and erratic. How good it is to rein the mind, which is unruly, capricious, rushing wherever it wants. The mind so harnessed will bring one happiness. Your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your own unguarded thoughts. A well-directed mind creates more well-being than even the loving action of parents toward their children. A wise person should pay attention to the mind, which is difficult to perceive. It is extremely subtle and wanders wherever it pleases. The mind well guarded and trained will bring one happiness. And a lot of times, I think wrongly, people separate like practice that's more wisdom oriented versus practice that's more tranquility oriented. This sort of happened in the years after the time of the Buddha, just separating wisdom and samadhi into like separate practices. But when you study the Buddhist teachings, as best we can this many years later, it really seems most of the time, I mean, it's good to know how to tranquilize, to develop that samadhi, that calm. But generally speaking, we need wisdom to develop samadhi, and we need samadhi to develop wisdom. So they're really working hand in hand. The image that's used in the tradition you might have heard is a honed and heavy axe, right? Like if we have a really sharp axe, but it's very, very light, there's not much metal to it, but it's really sharp. It's not really that good for cutting down a tree. Or if we have an axe that's really heavy, has a really heavy head, but it's not sharp at all, that's not very good for cutting down a tree. But if you have an axe that has a heavy head and it's really sharp, well, that axe can cut down a tree. And you might have guessed that the wakefulness, that's the samadhi, the calm, the settledness. And the sharpness is the wisdom piece. And for our mind to see things as they are, for the mind, the heart to have insight, which just means to see what we haven't seen or to uncover what we haven't uncovered about the way it is, the way the mind is, the way experience is. Like the Buddha says, we're living deluded, that the cause for suffering is not really understanding suffering, not understanding the way it is, like how it is that the mind is stressed or heavy. So we need insight, and to have insight, we need to develop the sharpness of wisdom and the solidity, stability of samadhi. And together, that's a beautiful mind. That mind can do what needs to be done. And not just in terms of spiritual practice, which, is the most important thing, at least in my mind, but just in all kinds of functional ways. When we have a lot of that sharpness of clarity, really seeing clearly how things come and go. Wise comprehension, wisely comprehending the way it is, and that real stability. We know how to solve the messy problems. I mean, never perfectly, but generally speaking, we just do a lot better navigating life, which is messy for us humans, navigating relationships, navigating power at work, at home, wherever in the community, navigating pain and trauma that we have, others have, all these sort of difficult parts of living, navigating having a body. It really helps to be wise and settled. And in a way, we don't even separate because there's really no wisdom without samadhi. And there's really no samadhi without wisdom. Like just in that first instruction to sustain present moment awareness, I mean, one of the things we have to learn so much about the mind just to sustain present moment awareness for any length of time. We have to learn that so much of the habit energy doesn't need to be fed with my attention, with getting identified with it. Oh yeah, it's just mental chatter. I don't have to take it personally. It's there, but if I keep looking at it, if I keep identifying what my mind is constructing, it's never going to settle down, right? It's in a way we have to say enough. Sometimes our cat, we call our cat Bear, and it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, it wants to come in, then it wants to go out, then it wants to come in, then it wants to go out, and it's like it doesn't know what it wants. Well, I know what I want. I want not to be disturbed. So we just say enough, you know. If you really wanted to be out, you'd stay out. Or if you really wanted to be in, you'd stay in. You don't know what you want. So let's do what I want. You're gonna stay out, or you're gonna stay in, or something like that. And so there's a place everywhere in life where we really want wisdom to kind of stand up as the parent in the room. Okay, honey, we're going to do this. So we need a little bit of that, at the beginning of a sit, we need a little bit of that forceful energy. This comes from a wonderful book. Maybe some of you have read it, 8 Mindful Steps to Happiness. One of our real elders in early Buddhism coming to the West is Bhante Gunaratana. Bhante is just a respectful way to refer to a Buddhist monk, especially in the Sri Lankan tradition. But any monk you see, you could call them Bhante, just a respectful term. And Bhante Gunaratana from Sri Lanka, he ordained when he was just a young boy, and now he's in maybe 93, something like that. He's got a monastery in West Virginia called Bhavana Society. And he wrote a wonderful book called 8 Mindful Steps to Happiness. And he has a chapter there because he's covering the Buddha's Eightfold Path, and Samadhi is 1/3 of the Buddhist path, right? Wise Samadhi, right Samadhi. And he has just some steps that are really useful, I think, for working with our minds. And I just want to go through some of them. So the first thing he says is, and I'll just read this short passage. For the period of your meditation, give up all thoughts of attachment to situations, ideas, peoples, and habits. Do not think of your family, friends, relatives, job, income, bills, investments, properties, or responsibilities. Tell yourself, I choose to spend this very special period of time to better myself. I did not sit down on this cushion, on this chair, to think all my regular thoughts. I will make good use of this time. Right? So this is like that resolve to abandon distraction. And it's not that these things are always distractions, but for the period of the time we set aside for meditation, even thinking through something we really need to think through, that's a distraction because that's not what we're doing now. We're not solving the problems that maybe actually need to get solved. That can be another time. You can set time aside for that. and happens a lot, is that people don't set aside time in their lives to think through things they need to think through. So then when they sit to meditate, that's what they do. They think through the things they need to think through. Well, you need to set aside time to think through the things you need to think through, you know? I mean, maybe you do that too much already, so you don't need that time. But some people avoid thinking through the things they need to think through in a more deliberative way. Sometimes people do that with like with a friend, or they do it through a journaling process, or they just do it through thinking through what they need to think through. But that's not our meditation time. So you want to understand that the mind might want to pick that stuff up, but you want to be parental, like, honey, this is not what we're doing now. We're not doing that now. Remember? We're cultivating the continuity of present moment awareness. We're remembering to recognize the present moment any way we can. We're developing this art of presence. And I'm told, we remind ourselves, I'm told this is onward leading to real freedom, to what the heart truly seeks. So it seems wise to put some time in every day to develop this new habit, to remember, to recognize the present moment, to sustain present moment awareness. Seems like it's worth the effort. It seems like it's worth putting everything else down. The second point that Bhante Gunaratana makes here is, do not worry about anything you might have left undone. So now he's really talking about this very tricky thing we call generally remorse, and he says, so don't worry about anything that you may have left undone, or about the things you have done incorrectly, or about the ways you may have offended someone. Remind yourself that the past is gone and what is done cannot be undone. Now, of course, you might have a flash. Oh my God, I said that. I need to make amends. Great, but not now. You can do that. You can resolve, okay, when I'm done with my meditation, if it still feels like I need to talk to that person and make amends or try to fix something that I broke, great, but not now. Right now, I understand that what has happened, happened. And I'm here to develop this particular skill. And that's why we need time, like, to check in, like, oh, what unresolved things are there in my life? And what do I need to do to resolve them? It's like we sit down, we haven't bothered to call our parent or old friend for years, and we start a meditation practice, and all of a sudden now we were totally okay avoiding doing that for years. But then now, and it's really a way of avoiding the difficulty of present moment awareness. And it's difficult because it's not the mind's habit. The mind's habit is to be distracted. So we're abandoning distraction, we're abandoning remorse. This is not the time to deal with unfinished business, mistakes that we've made. And then the third point he makes, spend a few minutes cultivating thoughts of loving kindness, loving friendliness, he says, to make the mind feel pleasant and better, able to concentrate. Then take 3 deep breaths. So it's like this, and we often hear this from our teachers, just like, hey, why not bring something positive to mind? And one of the things we learn, the more we study the mind, with Buddhist practices, one of the things we learn is that our attitude is always in play. So however fixed my mood is, or however fixed it looks, my attitude seems fixed. Seems like, yeah, this is just who I am. I am angry, or I am irritated, or I am tired. Over time, we learn the attitude, the kind of quality of our mind, it's always in play. It can change on a dime. And it's really important, like through the day, not even just in your meditation time, but all day long, to highlight those moments when the attitude goes from this to that, where you were a little down and depressed, and now you're happy, or you're a little happy, and now you feel some anxiety, or you're a little anxious, and now you feel peaceful. You're a little peaceful, and now you're angry. You're a little angry, and now you have a lot of kindness and friendliness. Really see that, whatever we take Mark to be or you take you to be, it's not a constant. I mean, it's like a useful question to ask, well, how many Marks have there been today? Or even, how many Marks have there been in the last 10 minutes? Because our mood, the quality of the mind, heart, how we see the world, how we're relating, it's always changing. And we tend to cover it up because it's disconcerting to us to see that clearly, because it doesn't make sense. Because our sort of background view is, hey, I am who I am. So, and that just happens to be whatever my particular mood or attitude is right now. Like, oh yeah, this is me. And we don't have that integrity, and we also don't haven't developed the skill for the continuity of present moment awareness to really see directly, immediately how fluid the attitude, the mood, the personality is. Somebody, I think it might have been Ajahn Sushito, one of the great elders in our tradition. He's a British Buddhist monk. He's been a monk for many decades. Wonderful teacher. You can find most of his stuff, books and talks online, freely available. You can just, Sushito is Sucitto, Ajahn. It's just a respectful term for like a Thai monk. And so he's in the Thai forest tradition. So he uses that term, Ajahn Sushito. But anyway, see, what was the point I was going to make about, I lost it. It may, hopefully will come back, having a senior moment. But let me go back to Bhante Gunaratana's points. So, abandon distraction, abandon remorse, cultivate a wholesome attitude, like bring loving kindness to mind, because the attitude's in play. And then the fourth thing Bhante mentions is focus the mind upon your chosen object of meditation, such as the breath. And, there are many skillful means for gathering, collecting, and you'll hear many from me, so not just one way. And that might be a little disconcerting because, you just want to be told what to do. But, there's a important point about becoming independent, developing different skills, knowing how to use them. And like the last instructions I've been using these last few weeks about the 4 instructions to sustain present moment awareness, to sustain silent present moment awareness, to sustain silent focused present moment awareness. And then I've been adding this piece about to sustain silent focused present moment awareness, but the part of the focus is on the pleasure of the seclusion itself, the pleasure of the calmness, the settledness, the stability of present moment awareness. Because it's that thread of pleasure that really is the trustworthy guide from what we could call a gross, an unrefined mind to a mind that's becoming more and more refined. And ultimately, for really deep states of concentration, the mind is really turned inward. It's really, the eyes still work, the ears still work, the nervous system still works, touch, you feel touches, the mind, the thinking mind still works, but the awareness has retreated in a sense, or you could say the awareness is fully interested in the pleasure of concentration, so interested in the pleasure of being settled that it's not interested in what the sense gates are sensitive to, sights and sounds and touches and smells and tastes and thoughts. Those grosser aspects of sense experience don't interest the mind, because the mind is really interested in, you could say, the concentration itself, the stillness, the silence, the peace, the mind being empty of the need to identify with or connect with sense experience. Excuse me. So that fourth instruction is really important. And there are many means to get there. Like I said, with the story of the genie, a lot of the times giving the mind something to pay attention to keeps the mind, the restless mind, out of trouble. Oh, I'm just being with the breath. Or I'm just being with the sensations of sitting. Or I'm just being with hearing. Or I'm just being with whatever's predominant. And even, that first instruction to sustain present moment awareness, we're just being with the totality of the present moment or whatever's predominant. But the actual anchor, there is an anchor. The anchor is the recognition of the present moment, moment by moment. So there are all kinds of skillful means to support this settling process. And a lot of it has to do with seeing what works for your mind and then persisting there. Really getting to know the territory of your own heart and mind and how it likes to settle. And everyone's going to follow the thread of pleasure because the settling process is inherently pleasurable. But it's the pleasure not like getting what you want, that kind of pleasure. It's really the pleasure of abandoning what usually irritates the mind. The mind, in a way, is getting simpler. And in that simplification, it's abandoning what is usually felt as a weight, as an agitating weight, because it's getting simpler. It's less attached, it's less interested in becoming, getting somewhere, doing something. And all of that letting go of what the mind would normally be picking up and identifying with is pleasurable. So that makes it a different kind of pleasure, which is like we have to develop a way of sensing that pleasure of simplicity. So I mentioned in the guided sit, I think, that we call that in Buddhism the pleasure of seclusion, or you could say the pleasure of renunciation. The mind is renouncing what it would normally be doing, and that's pleasurable. Ah, a good friend of mine and one of my teachers, someone I teach with now, Kamala Masters, wonderful teacher. She gave this example out at IMS. There's a loop that people walk when they're on retreat. This is a major insight meditation retreat center in Massachusetts where I teach now. And there's like a 4-mile loop, not so different than the loop where our retreat center is in Wisconsin, the same amount of distance. And a lot of the retreatants like to walk that in the middle of the day after lunch just to get a little exercise, but to do it mindfully. And there was a house with a owner had a dog. And, every day after lunch, there'd be 30, 40 people, some walking one direction on the loop, some walking the other. So there's and every time someone came by that house, the dog felt obliged to walk with them. And then someone would eventually pass the person going the other way, and the dog would feel obliged to walk with that person. And then someone would come the other way, and the dog would, and it was like the dog was in a way trapped with that habit, that instinct or whatever it was in the dog that I got to follow, right? So one day, Kamala, who's this, if you haven't met Kamala, is a very compassionate, loving person. And, she's been around there on retreat for many, many retreats over many years and then teaching for many years. So she saw this scene with this dog before it died. It's dead now. And so one day, Kamala just looked at the dog, and Kamala's the parent and a grandparent, knows how to be a parent, looks at the dog with this sort of boundless compassion, but also the fierceness of compassion, and says to the dog, stay, like basically coming from her heart, you don't have to follow everybody. You can just sit here and watch people come. And it really changed the dog's behavior. And it's a little bit like that with our mind. We're saying, yeah, of course you could think about this. Of course you could worry about this. Of course you could plan this or compare yourself to this person or wonder if you're doing your meditation practice right. Or there's probably a billion things you could think about or imagine or do with your mind. But you don't have to. You can just, and that's really this important quality of receptivity. You can just let nature, the nature of the mind, the nature of the moment unfold. So it's kind of a dying experience, just to be a little bit provocative, because we're letting that deep habit of being the doer doing something, we're training it to sort of be put down, to not be active. And learning not to be afraid, like there's another way of being, which is, let's just give it the word receptive. We can be profoundly receptive for a while and just learn what can be learned when we cultivate that quality of receptivity instead of cultivating the quality of being the doer doing something. And it's not like we're giving up being the doer doing something forever, right? We're just training the mind for that period to really, as much as possible, develop a relationship with this receptive, this bright and relaxed receptivity. It's kind of like the example I like to use is if someone is going to be a successful naturalist, well, the naturalist has to go to the environment of the animal, let's say, that it's studying, and then it has to blend in, and it has to be profoundly receptive. Otherwise, the behavior of the animal it's studying is going to be affected by the presence of the naturalist. So they just get out of the way. They try not to make a big splash, right? And it's a little bit like our meditation practice where we're just in the observer mode, alert, relaxed, not trying to make something happen, not even having a lot of fixed ideas about what we're going to see or learn, but just being receptive. Oh, it's like this now. This is arising. Feels like this now. This is being known. This is what the mind's doing now. Feels like this. Oh, the wanting mind, or the happy mind, or this mind, that mind, whatever it might be. So maybe I'll leave it here. There's, of course, so much to say, but we learn a lot from hearing from people. I know it's can feel a little awkward at times, but it's a real generous thing to um, share your experience or share your questions with the group about samadhi, share your frustrations, your doubts, right? And I'll respond as best I can, but just have a conversation, based on all of our learnings, working with our own mind. So feel free just to unmute yourself, or you can raise your digital hand if you know how to do that, but it's just fine to unmute yourself. Nice to always say your first name and share your pronouns if you'd like. You can also share where you're calling from if you want. Anybody feel like getting us started? What have you been learning about samadhi, about learning how to concentrate or settle or bring that stability of present moment awareness?
I guess I have a question, Mark. I could go
Yeah,
first.
please go ahead.
I am just wondering, as you were talking about following that thread of pleasure as your mind gets more gathered and the importance of that. Um, I don't know, it's not a fully formed question, but I guess I'm wondering there's something about like what about that pleasure is sort of worth following in and of itself that makes it kind of better or more wholesome or something than the other types of pleasure that we might experience? Or is it just that it's a useful tool to kind of keep your mind gathered? Because I feel like there's like that risk on the other side of like seeking out that pleasure of that settled feeling. And then to me, that feels kind of similar to like seeking out pleasure for pleasure's sake in other parts of my life, which is something I'm trying to get away from.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, really good question, Sarah. Appreciate you bringing it up. Yeah, and I try to explain it a little bit by saying it's like a different category of pleasure. Like one is the pleasure of renunciation, of letting things go, of moving towards simplicity, as opposed to when I seek out pleasurable entertainment or pleasurable food or pleasurable interactions with friends, pleasurable sensations in my body, like lying down or whatever that may, taking a warm bath. It's like I want to feed on the pleasure in a way. I want to get something from the food I'm eating, from the interaction I'm having. And in a sense, we're we're trying to own the nice experiences. But all of that is stressful for the mind. It doesn't mean that there aren't, obviously, there are pleasurable experiences, sense experiences. But the wanting them and the needing them and the wanting to get something from them makes them also stressful. So they're mixed. There's pleasure in life and sense experience, but the needing, the dependency, the liking them is stressful, right? And wanting more. And we're never really satisfied. Like most of us, in life, we've had a lot of pleasurable sense experiences, but we still want more. So seeking out sense pleasures doesn't actually lead to contentment. Now, the pleasure that this pleasure of seclusion, the pleasure of renunciation, as we learn to sense it, it has a different, it's sort of in a different category. And one word that is used or that can help is it has a sense of wholeness or fullness or even completeness, right? So as it develops, as the samadhi, as we follow that thread of pleasure and getting more calm, but we're really attuned to the pleasure, like what does this feel like? And you make a good point, Sarah. It is true that it can trigger greed, right? Oh, I want this. But the thing is, as soon as the mind wants the concentration, wants the settledness, it starts to lose it. So wisdom is going to learn pretty quickly wanting it doesn't help. Trying to get concentrated is not the proximate cause for getting concentrated. Wanting it, demanding it. What is the proximate cause is to follow the instructions and to relax, right? Because it's a natural process of abandoning what the mind would otherwise be doing, right? It's the mind's willingness to shed what's extra. And it has the kind of subjective, affective flavor of fullness or wholeness. It's a kind of healing. The mind is usually distracted, dissipated, fragmented. And as the samadhi deepens, there's a sense of being whole, WHOLE, like, solid even, like, ah. Which is sort of strange to say, that, because usually we think of lightness. So there's a solidity, but that solidity is light. It's easy. And there's a kind of life energy there. I mentioned how real samadhi is not dull. Dullness is a real hindrance. Real samadhi is bright. So there's the quality of joy. Piti is the Pali word, and it's just like champagne bubbles throughout the body and mind. Like everything's alive. Everything is energy, right? So there's a real brightness, but it's also like held in a kind of a solid sense of this, this. It's like this. This is how it is. And all of that is experienced subjectively in this very inner, you could even say personal way, as being healing, as being what the heart really wants. Even before we know it, if each step along the way, the heart is going, oh, this is what I want. This is what I truly want. And you're right, we all of us meditators, all the people interested, in the Buddhist teachings, we all have to navigate whatever greed gets triggered as we get to know this territory. But just because greed's getting triggered, we have to deal with it. We have to learn, oh yeah, greed isn't going to be helpful. So we don't feed it. We just keep coming back to doing the supporting causes for the deepening. And the basic supporting causes are to relax and to sustain present moment awareness. The Buddha was very clear. The proximate cause for samadhi is the sustaining of present moment awareness. Whether you're using an anchor or not, whether you're with your breath or with hearing, it doesn't really matter. It's the sustaining of authentic present moment awareness that deepens concentration. Yeah, thanks again, Sarah. Any follow-up to that before we move on?
Oh, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for getting us started. Anybody want to go next? Hi, Linda.
Hi, I'm Linda from Pennsylvania. She, her. I wanted to offer that recently. I just, living in this world, th- I, I just noticed how this practice and the recognition of the pleasure of seclusion and the simplicity and the relaxation, just really how healing that has been, especially recently, and just where all the turmoil is. It seems that over a few months, I was really just noticing just the dis-ease of being human, being an American, being human, and seeing a real value in just staying with that during my practice, just holding it, holding it, holding it, holding it. And then with the recognition of, well, it doesn't have to always be like this. Maybe this is a good time to look for the tranquility and peace, and when it's there, notice it and hold it, and by doing that and developing more samadhi again, which I hadn't been doing for some months, it's just been really healing. um, I think this is a difficult time, to be aware. It's always difficult to be a human, but boy, the this practice has really been healing. And so when you use the word healing, that really came out to me as something that I really have noticed in the last several weeks or so.
Yeah, thanks so much for that testimonial. I think it's really good to hear. And I think we should think of it as a beautiful gift. I mean, not to get prideful, but like it's really appropriate any efforts we make to settle. Like even if you're raising kids or you've got a stressful job or you're navigating traffic or it's wild at the grocery store, whatever it is, to offer whatever to whatever degree a sense of being calm. I mean, calmness is very close to loving kindness, right? It's like a willingness to be intimate. Because when we're calm, we're also, like I said, receptive and open and sensitive, right? You can't be calm without being sensitive. It's by definition, we are dropping a lot of the armor, the ways that we distance and learning to trust being raw and open and settled. And it's like I often use this image because I was raised a Catholic. I had a relatively good experience in the Catholic Church until my early teens, and then things didn't make sense so much. But a lot I appreciated. And one thing, I had statues when I was a kid. I had like Saint Joseph and Saint Francis and Mother Mary, and in my bedroom. And each of them, all three of those statues, because it's a kind of common image in Catholicism to have the heart sort of sitting a little bit outside of the body. I don't know if you've ever seen that. And it is the ultimate image of vulnerability and exposure. And I thought, oh yeah, that's now in hindsight, thinking back, I mean, that's a very useful religious spiritual image about like what's really holy, what's really sacred or useful, functional, is to learn how to be, we don't want to dull, we want to be sensitive, but we need the wisdom that makes it okay to be that sensitive. And part of what samadhi does is it's like a moisture to the exposure that comes with sensitivity. It's like it soothes the heart that because it kind of gathers and we feel like I mentioned in responding to Sarah, we feel whole, not fragmented. And that wholeness is a kind of spiritual safety. We trust it naturally, organically. We trust that sense of wholeness. Just like we get anxious when we feel fragmented. Yeah, thanks, Linda. Again, would like to go next? Any thoughts or questions, reflections from your own practice you'd like to share with the group?
I can say something. I was actually doing the meditation at a free text clinic in St. Paul, and it was, it's a little bit nuts, of course. And but I found myself very at ease. And then when you brought up the finding the silence, finding the silence in this space, and there was just something really lovely about it. And I think something about maybe not expecting to find some real ease and concentration there or something. The contrast really sort of brought up this openness to really actually experience that. And it was nice because I like sort of could really sort of like understand what you meant, I guess, and then like realize how the mind would come in with like there's this feeling and I wonder about this feeling, and then all of a sudden there's this image of a wave, and just really the way the mind really easily will go into something else besides that, and kind of like, but also knowing that like, okay, there's the wave, and is there still silence here, is there still this space? And it was just really lovely to sort of have that experience of like the contrast and still having the stability of that. I appreciate that a lot.
Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, and it's so, with that kind of stability that you describe, we learn a lot about our habit energies. And you could just, even though Jessica didn't say it explicitly, you can sense just in how she described her experience that a kind of wise space in terms of how they were relating to the thoughts and the different kind of ways the mind wanted to move. And we really wisdom gets the sense like, oh, it's really not personal. Like the habits, the restless habits of our mind, they're there, but the mind doesn't really know what's best for it. It just is acting on habit. And now there's this wisdom, and this wisdom that senses the healing of samadhi, of that continuity of present moment awareness, and doesn't want to lose it because of compassion, self-compassion. But we have to be respectful. Yeah, but there are these very powerful habits to think about this, to worry about that, to speculate, to want to even hold on to the concentration, like to make it mine. There's an infinite number of ways. So that's why the instruction to get familiar with the pleasure of seclusion, because that will build the confidence to do the hard work of keeping something subtle in mind. And it's especially subtle because we're just not in the habit of keeping it in mind. Now, of course, over time, the mind will get really good at it, but it takes time. Just like a musician can notice and keep in mind very subtle things that the rest of us would be oblivious to, well, they've trained their mind. And it's true in so many different fields, right? Where people get a very particular kind of sensitivity because they've trained their mind to be sensitive. And we can do the same thing with this sort of thread of wholesome pleasure, of the mind unifying, the mind simplifying. And there's a beautiful story. Maybe I'll just end with this. A lot of you probably have heard it, but it's just one of those great stories from the tradition. And the Buddha was, I might have shared this last week, I forget, I hope not, but in any case, the Buddha was remembering a time when he was a young boy, when he was practicing a lot of difficult ascetic practices, mostly fasting and other kind of related ascetic practices. And he didn't feel like he was progressing in his practice. He was frustrated. And so this memory came to him as being a young boy, and how his mind settled into a really beautiful unified state called jhana, one of the first jhana. So there's a lot of energy, a lot of brightness, but also really collected and firm. And remember that he remembered the pleasure of that. And his mind asked, like, do I need to be afraid of that pleasure? And then his own mind answered the question, no, I don't need to be afraid of that pleasure. That pleasure is useful. That pleasure is onward leading. And it's similar to the point I made earlier when I said that, if we get attached to the pleasure of settling, of concentration, we'll lose it. So there's something built in. It's like the greed is immediately seen as not helpful. And so, yeah, we'll make some missteps. We all do as the mind begins to drop into more concentrated states. Greed will arise and we'll lose it. And then we'll judge ourselves, or we'll hate ourselves, or wonder if we'll ever get it back. There's an old kind of funny statement for people who are doing like 9-day retreats, Buddhist retreats, which is something like, the best way to ruin a 9-day retreat is to have a good sit. Because as soon as you have a good sit, you spend the rest of the days trying to have it again, right? And wanting to have a good sit like you had is not the way to get it back. The best thing to do when you have a good sit is to clarify what were the supporting causes for that good sit. What was the mind doing? How was the mind relating? And to do that, not to want it. Wanting is the cause for stress, not getting settled. Anyway, I appreciate the comments tonight, and really nice to be with everyone. Just remember, if you know someone who's interested in introduction workshop, Stacy McClendon will be teaching this Saturday, 9 to 1. That's just in person at the center in Minneapolis. They're also doing one in August. I forget the day, but maybe the third Saturday in August. That's going to be both online and in person. I'll be doing a day-long retreat on the 27th, both in person and online, and I think we'll probably focus on concentration practice for that retreat. So join in, and also I'll be leading the half-day retreat on August 3rd. And there's a practice period. Anybody who wants to get out to our retreat center, July 25th through the 28th. And then Corey Clemenson, our longtime leader and construction manager, is going to be doing a work retreat out there the 9th of August to the 15th. Really fun time to be with community, and a little sitting a couple times a day, but doing some work around the retreat center to make it a more beautiful place. So join into any of that. Thanks again, everyone. Hope to see you down the road. Feel free to unmute yourself and say good night if you want.
Thanks.
Good night, everyone. See you later.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everybody.